The scent of mesquite smoke, mixed with the tang of barbecue sauce, hung in the warm Arizona air as the Walker family's annual summer cookout kicked off in the suburbs just outside Scottsdale. The back patio buzzed with laughter, the kind that echoed off stucco walls and mingled with the clatter of grilling tools. Kids zigzagged between plastic lawn chairs like pinballs shrieking with glee, while uncles leaned back with beers in hand, arguing over their fantasy football picks as if they were NFL coaches. I stood slightly apart, propped against the wooden slats of the fence, sipping a tall glass of lemonade. At 32, I was still seen as the eccentric art major who never quite figured things out, at least in their eyes. My younger sister Chloe, always the star of the show, stood radiant in the center of the gathering, her powder blue jumpsuit hugging her frame just right under the setting sun. She was animated, practically glowing, as she regaled a group of aunts and cousins with stories of her recent triumphs. Chloe just completed her dual masters at Wharton, and MIT mom Linda announced proudly, her voice pitched just high enough for everyone within a zip code to hear. She's had back-to-back interviews with Fortune 500 companies. That girl is destined for greatness. Her words were saturated with maternal pride, the kind that makes you believe she curated every milestone herself. I took another slow sip of my drink, bracing for the contrast I knew was coming. Meanwhile, Linda added with a pointed sigh, the warmth leaving her voice, "Some of us still haven't figured out what they're doing with their lives." Isn't that right, Erin? She didn't even look at me as she said it, like it was just another fact, another passive jab embedded in small talk. I arched one eyebrow but held my tongue. Over by the grill, Dad Frank let out a chuckle, flipping a thick steak with the ease of a man more familiar with tailgates than tech. "Still fiddling around with that little digital whatever thing you're doing?" he asked, lips tugging into a grin. What was it called again? Something about workflow. His laugh wasn't mean, not really, but it carried that familiar condescension that always managed to sting just enough. I dragged a thumb through the condensation on my glass, thinking about the 9 a.m. boardroom meeting scheduled for the next day. The one where I'd close the acquisition of Halden & Co. The one where we'd reveal our expanded executive team. The one where our founder and CEO of Cascade Logic would sign off on a deal that had taken 9 months to orchestrate. Something like that, I murmured, letting his words roll off me like steam off the grill. Just then, Chloe clapped her hands and raised her voice. "Big news," she announced with theatrical flair. "I've got an interview tomorrow with Cascade Logic. They reached out to me directly. It's one of the top tech firms in the country right now." Applause and cheers broke out around her like a standing ovation. Aunt Susan hurried forward with a half-filled glass of rosé, practically swooning. "Oh, Chloe, that's amazing. I read about their founder, a total genius, completely self-made." Dad nodded like a proud investor. "They're tough to get into. They don't just hire anybody." I bit the inside of my cheek, suppressing a laugh as I thought about the polished shortlist sitting in my inbox from HR. Chloe's name was highlighted in blue. She had no clue that the company she'd been fawning over for weeks, the company she believed would be her golden ticket, was mine. She didn't know I built Cascade Logic from scratch in a cramped Tempe apartment 10 years ago, while she coasted on family connections and curated credentials. "What's the position?" I asked, casually swirling my lemonade. Her eyes sparkled with ambition. "Senior strategy consultant," she said like she was unwrapping a trophy. "It's practically an executive-level track." I smiled into my glass. "Can't wait to see how that goes." She laughed, then leaned toward me with a syrupy smile. "Maybe once I'm in, I can recommend you for something entry-level. I'm sure they have admin roles you'd be great at, Erin." Mom nodded approvingly, like Chloe had just solved a family crisis. "That's very sweet of you, honey. Heaven knows your sister could use the help." 32 and still. She trailed off, waving a dismissive hand in my direction. I thought about my corner office downtown on the 27th floor with floor-to-ceiling glass that overlooked Camelback Mountain and a sleek private lounge where I hosted venture capitalists. About the Forbes article from last month that called me one of the most influential women in tech. They had used my alias E.R. Lin and chosen a silhouette photo to keep my privacy intact. I had built Cascade Logic in the shadows by design, but I always knew this moment would come. "That's thoughtful of you," I said, my voice steady, maybe even amused. Good luck tomorrow. Chloe gave a smug little smirk and brushed imaginary lint from her pristine sleeve. Some of us make our own luck, Aaron. You should try it sometime. The conversation shifted toward someone's new townhouse and my uncle's latest pickleball championship. Chloe's academic brilliance became the table's next topic of praise, while I let it all wash over me like background noise. Tomorrow everything would be different, and I was determined to soak in every second of this final night as the family's favorite disappointment. As the sun dipped low and dusk settled like a warm blanket, Chloe stood up and tapped her glass. "Gotta call it an early night," she said with a proud smile. "Want to be at my best. Word is the CEO of Cascade Logic will be sitting in on final interviews. Some mysterious woman, Erin Lynn, or something. No one even knows who she is." She laughed confidently. "They're going to love me. By this time tomorrow, I'll be on their executive strategy team. Maybe then you'll finally have something to brag about," she joked to Mom, winking. Linda wiped the corner of her eye like she was watching a graduation speech. "Oh, sweetheart, we're already proud. At least one of our daughters stayed the course." I glanced down at my watch. 13 hours and 58 minutes until Chloe walked into that conference room and saw who was really behind the desk. 13 hours until the entire narrative flipped on its head. I grabbed my purse, muttered something about an early client call. "Oh, your little remote gig," Mom said, waving me off. "Just don't forget to Venmo your share for Dad's birthday." Chloe already covered most of it again. I gave a nod and turned toward the driveway. They didn't need to know my remote gig had pulled in over 8 figures last quarter alone. Let them hold tight to their misconceptions. I climbed into the plain gray SUV I used for family functions, my white Mercedes AMG safely tucked in its reserved spot downtown. As I reversed, I heard Chloe's voice cutting through the night one last time. "Tomorrow everything changes." She was right, just not in the way she expected. If you want to witness the exact moment my sister Chloe's perfectly sculpted world tilted on its axis, when the confident sparkle in her eyes turned to frozen disbelief, then you'd want to be in that room when she saw who sat across the interview table. But since you weren't, you'll have to settle for my version of it. Trust me, it was worth every second. What a waste, she'd once scoffed behind my back, echoing my parents' dismissive tone. "Can't even get a proper job." I had said nothing at the time, choosing instead to let the moment pass. But as I sat back and recalled that insult, softly smiling at the memory, I could see the brushed steel nameplate perched on my desk, gleaming under the recessed lighting like a medal. Aaron G. Walker, Chief Executive Officer, Cascade Logic. Tomorrow, Chloe Madison Walker would discover exactly what a real job looked like and why, no matter how shiny her resume, she would never hold one at my company. By 6:30 a.m., the city skyline was already aglow in the pale gold of desert morning light streaking across the glass walls of my corner office on the 27th floor. The early hum of technology awakening servers spinning up security logs, checking in elevator panels flickering was strangely reassuring, a symphony of quiet purpose. My Alexander McQueen suit, tailored in storm gray wool, felt like more than fashion, it was battle armor. As I reviewed the morning's agenda, calm and focused, there was a soft knock on the frosted glass door. Jasmine, my executive assistant, entered with her usual poised professionalism, carrying a slim folder. "Your sister's interview is scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp," she said, placing the folder gently on my desk. "She's already downstairs. Arrived 25 minutes early." I raised a curious eyebrow. "Punctual, that's new." Jasmine allowed herself a small smirk. "She's also posted about it. Her exact words, future executive at Cascade Logic." I stifled a laugh. She's making it easy for marketing. She even told the front desk staff she intends to modernize the company's branding once she's hired, of course. "Has she now?" I murmured as I opened the folder. On paper, Chloe was flawless, dual graduate degrees, polished professional background, articulate, charismatic. But I knew the scaffolding behind the portrait internships, created through our father Frank's golf buddies' performance reviews, padded by our uncle's legal firm, glowing references rooted more in politics than performance. Her credentials were curated, like a social media feed, slick, shiny, and hollow. "The board's curious why you're personally handling this one," Jasmine added, voice teasing. I glanced up. "Quality control," I said, standing. "How many interviews before mine?" "3, she replied. "They've all been briefed. They'll know what to ask." By 9 a.m., I stood behind the one-way glass on the upper-level conference floor watching her glide into the interview suite like it was a red carpet premiere. Chloe looked every bit the power candidate, Chanel suit, Prada heels, shoulders squared, and confidence turned up to 11. She greeted each interviewer with a crisp handshake exuding that polished charm she'd honed since college. But as the minutes stretched into hours, I watched the polished veneer begin to slip. The questions got harder, the smiles more forced. Her scripted anecdotes faltered under deeper scrutiny. Each shallow achievement was gently unraveled. Each rehearsed line deflated by nuance and follow-ups she hadn't anticipated. By the time the final interview was called, the sparkle in her eyes had dimmed, her voice grew hesitant, and even the tilt of her chin betrayed unease. "Send her in," I instructed. She stepped into my office with hesitant grace, eyes darting briefly over the panoramic view, the curated art lining the walls, the power humming quietly beneath every element of the space. For a moment, she seemed transfixed, but quickly reassembled her expression into one of composed professionalism. "Please have a seat, Miss Walker," I said, my back to her, my voice cool, clipped, practiced. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Walker," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk, folding her hands neatly in her lap. I turned my chair slowly, deliberately to face her, and locked eyes. "Actually," I said, voice level and unflinching, "it's Miss Walker, Erin Grace Walker." Her face paled in an instant. The light of realization struck her like a lightning bolt, and I could see every particle of her understanding shift. Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. The name on the walls, the signature on the press releases, the mysterious CEO she'd confidently claimed she'd impress, the sister she had spent a decade underestimating. "Hello, Chloe," I said with a serene smile. "Surprised to see your directionless sister sitting behind the desk you've been aiming for." Her eyes flickered rapidly, and she drew a shaky breath like someone trying to wake from a nightmare. "That doesn't make sense. You're just a freelance consultant." "That's what Mom said." "Is that so?" I tilted my head and gestured behind me to the wall adorned with awards-framed covers and international accolades. "While you and Mom laughed at my little business thing, I was building one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the Southwest. While you waved your MBA like a badge, I was closing international partnerships. While Dad called me a phase, I was hiring top talent from companies you only read about." Her voice cracked, disbelieving. "You lied to us. You tricked us." I leaned forward, my tone quiet, measured, unwavering. "No, Chloe, you tricked yourself. You all did. So certain I was a failure, none of you ever asked what I was actually building." Without another word, I reached for my phone, opened the banking app, and held it up for her to see. The amount I transferred for Dad's birthday gift was enough to buy a car. To me, I said softly, "This is just a rounding error." Her eyes filled not with sorrow, but with fury, with humiliation. "So what now? You're going to humiliate me. Tell the whole family." I shook my head. "I don't need to say a word. Your interview performance already said it all. 3 senior partners independent of one another recommended against your hire. Too arrogant, too surface level, too entitled. You weren't set up, Chloe. You simply weren't ready." I rose from my chair, adjusting the line of my blazer. "If you're serious about your career, start by gaining real experience, something more meaningful than LinkedIn flair and family favors." Chloe stood as well, though less steady. Her heels now wobbled, her outfit, once commanding, seemed ill-fitting like a borrowed costume from a play she hadn't rehearsed. "Do Mom and Dad know?" she whispered. "They will," I said as I reached the door. "I imagine you'll tell them about your interview with E.R. Walker." I pressed the intercom button. "Jasmine, please escort Miss Walker out and cancel dinner with my family tonight." "Yes, ma'am," came her crisp reply. "I've got a board meeting that needs my full attention," I added, stepping aside as Chloe passed. Her composure finally cracked outside my door, her sobs muffled but raw, a far cry from the victorious exit she had surely imagined. The first message came less than an hour after the door had closed behind Chloe's retreating figure, her heels clicking hollowly down the polished marble hallway. The familiar ping of my phone vibrated against the lacquered surface of my desk, a shrill reminder that the reckoning had begun. It was from my mother. "What kind of cruel joke is this? Chloe is devastated." Then came Dad, his tone thick with disapproval that practically oozed from the screen. "How dare you humiliate your sister like this? We raised you better." I stared at the cascade of accusations, each word more indignant than the last. For a moment I let the device rest silently in my hand. the glow from the screen fading as I exhaled slowly, letting my gaze drift back out to the skyline of Phoenix, where the first hints of late morning haze began to rise over the city. At last they knew. They finally understood who I was, though they were decades late to the revelation. But the thing they hadn't yet realized, and perhaps never truly would, was that their approval no longer tethered me, hadn't for years. I had stopped seeking their validation the moment I discovered my own worth, didn't hinge on whether they recognized it. So I tapped back only one message into the group chat, each word deliberate and precise. You raised me to be successful. Congratulations. You did. Now maybe you'll recognize what real achievement looks like. Then I set the phone down screen side to the wood grain and returned to what mattered, steering a billion-dollar tech firm that had reshaped its sector while they were too busy ridiculing what they never tried to understand. Let them sit with it. Let them stew in the discomfort of a truth they never saw coming. I wasn't going to slow my stride just to make room for their apologies or their excuses. Over the next several weeks, the shift in our family dynamic wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and undeniable. The air between us when we spoke felt different now, heavier. Conversations once peppered with passive jabs about my little business thing were now lined with strained silences, like everyone was tiptoeing around a sleeping beast they'd once mocked. Birthday Zoom calls became awkward affairs, all stiff smiles and guarded pleasantries. The warmth never returned. Chloe, in what felt like a cruel cosmic joke, accepted a position as a mid-tier project coordinator at a modest digital agency across town. No corner office, no grand title. Just a job modest and forgettable, earned the old-fashioned way. For a woman who had strutted through life on a runway paved with nepotism and family praise, it was a brutal descent. Mom and Dad Linda and Frank quietly suspended their beloved Sunday barbecues, the weekly traditions, where they once paraded Chloe's accomplishments like a crown jewel. Maybe it was shame that silenced the invitations. Maybe it was confusion not knowing how to exist in a world where the daughter they once dismissed as a failure now commanded an empire. But the moment that drew the final line through our shared past came 3 months later, when Forbes released their cover story. The silent success, how one woman built a billion-dollar company, while her family thought she was failing. There I was staring boldly from the cover in a crisp navy suit chin, raised slightly Cascade Logic's skyline stretching behind me in sleek dominance. No silhouette, no shadows, just me, unmistakably me. I had 10 copies delivered overnighted to every family member's doorstep. No note, no explanation. Just the magazine. Just the truth laid bare in glossy pages and well-researched prose. The article unfolded my journey in painful, poetic detail, from scrounging together freelance work in a shoebox apartment in Tempe to crafting a technological powerhouse known for its AI integration and strategic impact. It didn't gloss over the hard parts, the missed holidays, the rejected pitches, the sleepless months of code and coffee. It shined a light on the sacrifices they never noticed, the persistence they never praised. And in its final paragraph, the closing line said it all. Sometimes success doesn't need to shout. Sometimes it just signs the checks. I didn't need their applause anymore. I had built something real, something they could neither deny nor take away. Let them spin new tales for their neighbors. Let them revise their memories and rewrite their roles in my story. It didn't matter anymore. While they sorted out their fragile pride, I was preparing Cascade Logic's European expansion, finalizing contracts for 2 major enterprise clients, and dedicating my time to mentoring the next generation of women carving out their space in tech. My days were filled with strategy, impact, and vision, not guilt or nostalgia. Success had already spoken, and it had spoken for me. And yet this story isn't about revenge. Not really. If you've ever been underestimated by the very people who were supposed to believe in you, if you've ever felt invisible at your own dinner table, I see you. I was told I was too vague, too artsy, too impractical. Chloe was celebrated while I was the cautionary tale. But I didn't scream for validation. I didn't demand they see me. I just built quietly, brick by brick, until they couldn't ignore it. And now for the first time I'm telling this story not to prove anything to them, but to remind you that you don't need permission to succeed. Your worth is not a product of anyone else's vision. It's yours to define. Oi grai, yao. So if you've been made to feel small, if you're still building in silence, If you've ever dimmed your light to make others more comfortable, drop a comment below. Tell me your story. Share what you're working on. Let me know who you're proving wrong, not out of spite, but to finally breathe freely in your own truth. And if my journey from being labeled unemployable to becoming CEO sparked even a flicker of recognition or encouragement, and you consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Not for me, but for us. For the space we're building here, one where quiet strength is finally seen and celebrated. A place where resilience isn't overlooked and every story of grit matters. Let them laugh, let them doubt, let them dismiss you. We'll keep building,